So sustainability is simply this line where you are having no negative impact to the environment, and ultimately that's, I think, a very simple definition. But today, this kind of level of performance in building terms is thought of as something really quite utopian, something that people don't expect to see anytime soon, or even if they do assume it, it's just going to be so expensive, it's not really going to be financially feasible, even if it's technically feasible. I would disagree with that, and I would also say that we need to readjust our attitudes so that we really begin to consider this as a kind of minimum level of performance. If you have, solar energy, and let's say a very sort of typical middle-range photovoltaic panel these days is about 15% efficient, right? So it converts 15% of the sun's energy to electricity, and by the time you've taken that and run it through an inverter and so on, so that it becomes AC, maybe you're getting out, say, 13% of the sun's energy. And it happens instantaneously and so on. Okay, so 13%, that may not sound like much, but I mean, let's compare it to the alternatives. Biomass is a big issue these days. And, again, let me just repeat that with the exception of nuclear energy and geothermal energy, which is in a sense a form of nuclear energy, all energy that we use is solar energy. Fossil fuels is solar energy. Biomass is solar energy, but you'll be very lucky if you get 2%, if you can capture 2% of the sun's energy in biomass, and then, it's going to take 6 months or a year to grow it, and then you burn it, right? And maybe that's 30% efficient. So by the time you finish that process, that's about a 0.6% efficient solar energy conversion device. And then there are some even worse examples than that, fossil fuels, in which you take that biomass and over, let's say, 10 million years, which is, a kind of time frame that would be very difficult to get commercial financing for, I think, you transform it to a very, dense, transportable, energy-dense form, coal or oil, and by the time you burn that, you're down to a, 0.081 or 0.00094% efficiency of solar energy conversion. So just, if anybody tells you that photovoltaics is inefficient, tell them that's not true. We've been working with a group in New York City that does research and development and educational activities around hydroponic greenhouse growing. So hydroponics are a way to grow vegetables, typically lettuces, tomatoes, vine crops, and so on, in greenhouses using very little water, no pesticides, very high yields, very good quality, and so on. And this is what we've come up with. Here is a nutrient film hydroponic system where you have, in this case, lettuces and other greens growing in these trays where you have a very small amount of water with just the right nutrients in it, recycled, so it's a recycled stream of water and nutrients. Typically done in horizontal greenhouses, but we of course want to integrate this into our building, so we're developing a vertical system that can fit within a double wall, a double facade type of application. And you can see that there's actually some very interesting benefits to doing this. One is, in a practical sense, this sort of conveyor belt vertically that takes about 30 days to make a round trip. So you have one person at the bottom planting new crops, and then 30 days later it's come around, so you harvest the mature crops. So all the service gets done from the bottom. You don't have people walking in front of your windows picking lettuces and so on. And also, you can use this as a controllable shading device for a building, kind of like Venetian blinds. And again, here are some studies that we've done with Arup that look at sort of further energy and other environmental benefits one can get with a building. I mean, there's the thermal transfer in hot or cold weather, the exchange of carbon dioxide. I mean, there's a lot of good symbiotic relationships between people and plants, and so basically we just want to take advantage of those. And here, as well as hopefully aesthetic and psychological benefits. experience. I mean, here's a cafe on the 100th floor of a hotel in Dubai, let's say, where there is not a speck of green plant anywhere in sight, and you have a wall of strawberries. So I mean, it's I think could be, again, the psychological benefits of this in some cases could vastly outweigh the economic and nutritional ones. And here's another project that we are working on, not definite yet, but we're proposing for the Emirates. Now, the United Arab Emirates, where there is no fresh water. Water is a huge issue around the world, particularly in parts of the world that are developing most rapidly. So here, essentially, you have a large food market where the food is grown in the walls and the ceiling, and so you have no transportation or storage issues, and this stuff is growing all around you. So I think it could be quite an amazing environment, surprising one, and one I think that could work functionally quite well, even in an extreme climate like that. The implications of 9/11 to an architect, to somebody who's watched these buildings fall, were pretty clear. I mean, there was an obvious connection, of course, between geopolitical issues and energy issues and so on, and this event, but also much more specific ones like building safety and so on and so forth. And frankly, maybe it's just having been there, but I cannot imagine designing a building in a conventional way, again, of that size, that essentially has one way out, right? So what we did is we took the opportunity to, we took the program of the two twin towers and consolidated it in terms of area into a single 150-story building that we called the 2020 Tower. And again, this was done with Arab engineers, and it was done originally for this show, but it's kind of taken on a different life of its own since then. And we tried to really engineer it in a very rigorous way. So our goal was to take what essentially is the most extremely dense building configuration we could imagine and make it a zero impact, sustainable, or in fact a productive building. And as well, this scribbled sketch was meant to show that we felt it very important also that this sort of project was socially sustainable. So instead of being just a single giant office project like the World Trade Center was, we postulated that the building would have the same kind of mix of uses that you have within the city, that in fact it was a vertical city. And there really are a lot of benefits, technical ones, because instead of a gigantic office building where everybody comes to work at 9 o'clock, everybody you have 50,000 people flushing toilets at 12:05, and then everybody goes home at 5:30, and there's enormous peaks of usage and so on. By having a kind of mix of uses, you can have the office and residential and commercial sort of offsetting each other, and really a much more efficient way to operate a building and to design its systems. When you have an 800-meter tall building, you're pretty certain to have good wind up at the top. So that's what we have here. Wind turbines getting producing energy at about 33% of the total at the top. And here you can also see some of the kind of zoning we did in the project. So you have every 30 floors, which actually turns out to be a very sensible kind of increment in terms of building mechanical systems. We have a public space, which can contain different public functions, shopping, retail, restaurants, and so on. Outdoor space as an amenity like parks in the sky, also as a safety feature. You can land a helicopter every 30 floors up and down this building, so you're never more than 15 flights of stairs from a helicopter. And here you can see it is a very thin building. The bottom it gets a bit thicker, but most of it is only ever 15 meters deep. There are these public floors, every 30 floors, as I said, which we figured would always have one special function like a hotel or like a theater complex or botanical gardens or something. And then around that you would have shopping and restaurants as well as these outdoor spaces, so that you would really encourage people to mingle and visit different parts of the building. Again, this idea of a vertical city and vertical community. And well, here you can get a sense of the thinness in our 120th floor botanical garden. There's the helicopter taking off. As well, the biological waste treatment systems, which are exposed actually as a kind of green belt around these 30-floor public spaces so that you can actually see they become a green element that's part of the sort of vertical urban infrastructure. You know, we really need to remember that we're doing this for ourselves to some extent, but you know, we're doing it for generations to come. And you know, if we don't get on it pretty quickly, you know, these guys are going to have a very difficult time of it. So, thank you.